Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mining the Heart, How to Emotionally Connect with Readers. If you've stopped by to learn more about picture book writing or just want to strengthen the overall emotional center of any book that you're writing, you are in the right place. My name is Kaitlyn Wells, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a journalist and author who covers the intersection of technology, style, and pets through the New York Times Wirecutter. My first picture book, A Family Looks Like Love, debuted this spring, and it's with Penguin Random House. In it, I share a childhood experience about the ostracism of growing up biracial, but it's with a twist, and it's from the perspective of my adorable dog Sutton, who you see pictured with me in my author headshot. But I'm not here to talk about that book. Today, we are going to discuss how you can apply heart to your own manuscripts. Although I will say A Family Looks Like Love has a whole lot of heart, and I hope you'll consider buying a copy. It's no longer available for pre-order. You can actually buy it now. Before we get started, this session does have a brief exercise tied into it, so I encourage everybody to pause the video and go grab a sheet of pen and paper, maybe a couple of highlighters if you're feeling creative. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's get to it. When it comes to picture books, there's a lot of elements that come into play with them, right? Picture books can be often difficult to create, and they're deceptive in how difficult they can be. To write a great picture book, you need a lot more than structure, theme, and plot. I find the best picture books are incredibly complex in how the story is layered. There's a lot of advice out there when it comes to writing a dynamic picture book. Ask any 10 writers, and they'll all give you a different explanation for what layers or elements should be included in your picture book. But if you ask me, these are the elements that I think really matter in a picture book. You have your hook, what's the central element of your story, who your characters are, who are going to drive the story, what's the plot, what are the twists and turns in the story that's going to make it a book that somebody's going to want to come back to again and again because they're so surprised by it. The climax, that final oomph in the story before you hit that resolution, that just is so satisfying. The illustrations play a huge part in a picture book because they just breathe so much life into your story. The voice is how you're telling the story yourself, and when you impart your own perspective into it and your own stylistic choices. Humor, I think, is an element of picture books that are incredibly underrated. And of course, heart, which is the main topic of today's discussion. To me, I would say that heart is the most elusive element to get right. And I'll walk you through on, some tips and tricks that help me ensure that heart is in my story on every single page. Before we get to that, though, let's go ahead with a little quiz on heart. Let's see what you do and don't know. Question number 1. Heart is found in the middle of the story. Yes or no? Heart is found in the middle of the story. The answer is no. Heart can be found anywhere in a story. As long as you have a strong emotion, that's heart. If you're unsure what heart is, you can also think of it as your emotional core or the central theme of your story. Question number 2. Heart usually occurs as a catalyst or at the climax of a story. The answer is yes. While any part of a story can contain heart, authors and readers tend to experience heart at those elemental moments in the story. Additionally, I really like to say that heart should be a guiding beat throughout the entire story. So yes, it occurs in those pivotal moments, but it can be anywhere, and a really strong story is going to have elements of heart throughout every single page. Question number 3, heart can be A, joyous, B, heartbreaking, C, sentimental, or D, shameful. Now, this is a tough one for sure. Let's see what it is. The answer is All of the above. I apologize for the trick question, but truly, heart is what you make of it. So when it comes to writing heart, you need to be vulnerable, take risks, and don't worry about trends or the ending. If you feel ashamed, sad, sentimental, or elated, then you're on the right track when it comes to heart, at least in my book. So now you have a rough sketch of what heart can and can't be. And here's why heart matters, at least from Kim Tomczyk, the author of The Elements Come Home. So why heart matters is, though details are wonderful, heart is the magic that makes readers feel that point of oomph in their chest, so the story stays with them long after the last page is turned. I love that quote. Feelings and facts are separate, yet interconnected elements, and defining the emotional truth in stories can be elusive, but the heart of a reader understands it. As a writer, that is the test we must strive to ace. So again, that oomph feeling can vary from reader to reader, but when you tell a great story, really sink into the emotional truth, that's when you've got them hooked. And that's when you've told a story that'll bring them back to your book and become a classic or treasure for years to come. So if you ever get stuck on why heart matters, remember it's that magic that makes a reader feel that poignant oomph in their chest, so that the story stays with them long after the last page is turned. So let's dive a little more into what heart is with some picture book examples. Now, there are clearly thousands of picture books out there that tell a fantastic story with a lot of heart. And for anyone who's unsure why the focus of this session is on picture books, it's because if you can't tell a strong story with few words, it's going to be harder to tell a strong story in a novel-length work. And I think really honing into the bare bones of what heart is and the necessary parts in a story book, that's really going to make your stories stronger going forward. So that's why these examples are all picture books. But basically, here are a few recent examples that have stood out to me the last couple of years. I hope you'll consider reading them as you dive into your own picture book or full-length book journeys. And I'd love to hear more about your own favorite mentor texts. So just tag me on social media with hashtag Mining the Heart to get the conversation going. So the examples I have on this page, we're not going to get through all of them, but just so you're aware, we have Swashby in the Sea, Evelyn Del Rey is Moving Away, Crown, Poetry, and Watercress. These are all great examples of picture books that do heart well. When it comes to doing heart well or applying heart, I like to think of it as there are 6 main ways you add elements of heart to your manuscript. Of course, the art will be shared by the illustrator, but you can offer suggestions if it's something vital to the story. You can also add heart to your characters, the pacing, senses, word choice, and voice. Often, heart comes as a result of sharing a personal truth or an aha moment, right? So by writing from a place of knowing, by writing from a place of your own heart, creators, writers, illustrators can really add depth to the emotion that their books are trying to evoke. If you've applied heart successfully, it won't come across as a lecture to the reader. It won't be heavy-handed with morals or over-explain the theme. You'll create a theme in your reader's mind so that when they finish the story, they'll instinctively know what the bigger picture is all about, right? So if you do it well, readers aren't really going to notice that there's this emotional tug. They're just going to realize, oh, I love this story. I want to keep it on my shelf. I want to read it again and again, and I want to share it with everybody I know. So going back to the previous slide, we're going to dive into a couple of picture book excerpts. See if you can spot which of these elements of heart are represented throughout the page. So as a reminder, we have art, characters, pacing, senses, word choice, and voice. See if you can spot those in the following examples. First up, in Swashby and the Sea by Beth Ferry and illustrated by Juana Martinez Hill. This tells the story of a retired captain who wants nothing more than to live in a secluded beach house in peace. But a young girl and her granny disrupt his quiet retirement, and they try to be his friend. Being less than neighborly, he writes messages in the sand telling them to stay away. One message he writes says, "Now vanish," but the sea has other plans, and the waves wash away the message and leave behind the simple phrase, "wish." So let's take a look and see what happens. With ish, the girl read, picking up the starfish, and did just that. She closed her eyes and began, "I wish." If you mean to make a starfish wish, oh, excuse me, I'm totally lost. Let's start over. So, wish, the girl read, picking up the starfish, and did just that. She closed her eyes and began, "I wish." No, no, Swashby interrupted, stomping down the steps. If you mean to make a starfish wish, you must say this. Starfish back the wave so blue, the sea will see a wish come true. How lovely, Granny said. We wished you'd come for a cup of tea, Mr. Swashby. And I apologize, I'm not even going to attempt to do the pirate voice, but you get the idea. But Swashby wished to be left alone, so he grumbled and mumbled and hurried inside. He didn't need tea. He didn't want tea. Tea was civilized, friendly, neighborly. What he needed was a new message. "Please go away," he wrote firmly in the sand. And once again the sea fiddled just a little. "Play," the girl sounded out, and did just that. With Swashby's shells and stones, he was with his buckets and shovels. But her towers kept falling. "Barnacle's bottoms," Swashby muttered, marching out. "You're doing it all wrong. He must not use the sun-baked sand, as the sea sand does the trick." And he showed her how to dig for the wet sand below. I love that. There are so many elements of heart in this story. It's funny, it's clever, it has a sweet ending. I really encourage you to check out Swashby in the Sea. In the next example, we have Evelyn Del Rey is Moving Away by Meg Medina and illustrated by Sonia Sanchez. It relives a day many of us can relate to. It's about two little best friends who spend one last fun-filled day together before one of them moves far away. It's a simple idea that's brilliantly executed thanks to the application of heart. In this excerpt, we'll find the girls in their final moments together. "We can talk every day after school," I tell her, though the world is still whirling. "And you can visit me this summer," she says, "and spend the night." Evelyn and I hold hands in the wide empty space. We lean back and start to spin in circles, faster and faster until everything is a blur around us. Our fingers slip, but we do not let go until we wobble to the floor. But I know that tomorrow everything will be different. Evelyn will be in a new home that doesn't match mine. Before we leave, I spot something in the corner, left behind the desk. It's the last of Evelyn's sparkly stickers. We go downstairs and I press a heart to her cheek to seal our promise. Then she does the same. Then she does mine just the same. We say patata while Mommy takes a photo. We do our secret handshake one more time, and then Evelyn hugs me hard. I really love Evelyn Del Rey is Moving Away because it captures those fun moments between two best friends just having fun, running up and down the stairs, making memories by playing in giant moving boxes, and then something that I'm sure many of us did as we were kids, we pulled out our sticker books and exchanged stickers together and put them all over our faces. And that's just a beautiful detail that I don't see in a lot of picture books. You know, these quiet memories play out an entire story, and I just really love that. Something I have added to this presentation is my own picture book now that it has been released. It's called A Family Looks Like Love. It's a retelling of my own childhood experiences growing up Black, biracial in Texas. But to make it more accessible, I tell it from the perspective of my own dog, Sutton, who loves everybody that she meets. The reasoning behind this is because it was a little bit easier reliving those traumatic childhood memories by telling it from the perspective of Sutton. So here are a couple of frames. Sutton was having fun with her doggy siblings, playing. She gets tired, decides to take a break, and runs into a honeybee. So the honeybee asks, why aren't you playing with your friends? And she responds, they aren't my friends, they're my siblings, Sutton said. I don't believe you, the bee seemed. Their fur is yellow, while you're mostly brown. The bee buzzed back into their hive. The bumblebee's words stung, but they gave Sutton an idea. The little pup barked high above and asked the bee for some honey. Then she rolled around in a pile of bright yellow pollen, making a sticky, sweet mess. There, now she looked like her sibling, but not for long. For this example, I think the illustrations have a strong showing of heart, something that can, be really challenging to get across with just the manuscript in general, especially when we're, anthropomorphizing animals. So I really love this spread in particular because you've got a really sad-looking Sutton looking at her reflection in the water, and she's thinking about, wanting to match her doggy siblings, who are mostly yellow. And you've got this great cloud above her that has her imagining, if everybody matched. And that pulls on my heartstrings a lot because it's like that's so personal and emotional of a memory to come across, especially when you're talking about somebody of mixed heritage or who comes from an adopted family or just who has a different skin color from their family members in general. And I really love that you have this really emotionally sad image. And then when you turn the page, there's so much joy that comes across too of just this silly puppy being silly. All right, so that's something what I really love about those first two stories that I shared are their approaches to friendship. All right, so when Wash Me in the Sea and Evelyn Del Rey is moving away, they use descriptive language like stomped, mumbled, and grumbled. The typical annoyance you may feel when you're arguing with someone, there's also a lot of joy in how they play and interact with the people and the world they're in. The gorgeous details of placing the stickers again on one another's cheeks, facing down hallways, turning moving boxes into automobiles, learning the proper way to dig into the sand. These are just emotionally strong and visceral moments virtually everyone has experienced and can relate to. And in A Family Looks Like Love, again, that moment when you realize, that you think that you don't belong, and when you want to belong, and that you'll go to, certain ways to get there, that can, really strike something in your center that I think the illustrations really helped get across. And honestly, for me, that's the great thing about heart. The examples can be both those quiet moments and those big moments, right? It's whatever makes you feel connected or drawn to the story. So pulling out these details to tell a great story doesn't always come naturally. I still struggle at times. You can tease out moments of heart by brainstorming, plotting, or pantsing your way through. But I think an underutilized method is the heart mapping method. With the heart mapping method, you'll learn to write inside the emotion and how the body feels, rather than write what the world expects you to experience in that moment, right? You'll understand how to write through the eyes of your character better and the emotion itself without necessarily telling us what that emotion is, which really comes across in the examples that I just shared. So basically, when we write, we tend to stick with what's in our heads, but that's not where emotion resides. That's the head space. The headspace isn't what draws the reader in. It's the visceralness of the story that captivates us, roots us in those emotions to our very core. And that's precisely why it can be so difficult writing emotions in the first place, right? We seldom connect to how we feel because as a society, especially in the US, we're taught to repress and ignore our emotions. So it can be emotionally draining when you allow yourself to experience those emotions. It can also be scary. The authors who can do this well embody and live inside the emotion as they're writing it, but you can't exactly do that without a roadmap to guide you. This heart map can work as that guide while you work through whatever emotions you've mined for your story. So while not every piece of the heart map may come across in the manuscript, especially when we're talking about picture books because they're limited, you can translate some of that heart into your illustration notes for the illustrator that they can use for inspiration. But as long as you do the work, you'll have a stronger understanding of what the heart of your story is and what you want the readers to feel, and that'll be your guiding light as you move throughout edits for the manuscript. So what we're going to do now is a heart mapping exercise, but before we continue into trying out the heart mapping method in this session, I want to make sure you have a sheet of paper and a pen. So you'll need this to work on the exercise. Feel free to pause if you need to grab it. We're not going to start it yet, but I'm going to kind of explain the process. So you still have time to grab your pen and paper. So to begin this exercise, you're going to draw a large heart at the center of your piece of paper. Make it as big as you can, as you'll want to fill up that heart with memories. When it comes to the heart mapping method, you need to think of the memories you have locked away. They don't have to be big or even exciting memories. Fill the heart with snapshots of the people, places, and the memories that hold the most value to you. Consider using a different color pen for each type of memory, or color in at the end to get a sense of how weighted the memories are in your mind. You'll notice if you value people, or memorable places, and so forth. When you do this exercise, avoid one-word answers. We want to be as detailed and specific as possible. You can also create a heart map for each story that you want to tell. So take for my picture book, A Family Looks Like Love, I might think about what it was like growing up and having strangers adamantly tell me that my mom was my mom, just because she was white and didn't look the same. So those are the facts, right? But what I'm going to do with my heart map is eventually dig into what it feels like in that moment of time. Did my heart race? Did my eyes water up? Do I remember seeing other people in the room? Did I, have a physical reaction? Did I think something in particular in my mind when somebody told me that? How did my mom react? How did this stranger conclude the conversation? What conversation did my mom and I have afterwards, later in the day? There are a lot of ways you can take that heart map by really honing into the specifics of what happens in that memory and, right before or after it as well. So use all of the senses when it comes to filling up that heart map. So for this exercise, you're going to decide if you want to mine your heart for what you value, or if you want to mine it with a specific story in mind, like I just gave. Either way, it's a lot to just think of memories on the spot. So here are some questions to get you started. Which people matter to you and why? For me, I like to, go back to a time period at least, even if I'm not thinking of a specific memory. Maybe I'll think back to the 5th grade or maybe middle school in general. Reflect on who were the people who mattered to me and why in middle school. What experiences or events will I never forget? Was it that, first middle school dance? Was it a Halloween party? Was it, my time on the yearbook staff? What are some happy or sad memories you have? What secrets do you keep in your heart? What things or objects matter to you? What's at the center of your heart? And what do you keep outside of your heart that you don't really want to think about? So this can be for a particular manuscript or story that you have in mind. It can be generalized to your childhood, or it can just be like a certain set period of time from your life that you can do this heart mapping reflection activity with. So as you fill in your heart map, you may notice subconsciously placing memories at the center of the page and others along the fringes. So while you work on that, you might want to ask yourself, if you want to keep the important things on the inside and less important things on the outside. Like, are you actively doing that? Or is it just something your mind is doing on its own? It might force you to reevaluate, what your childhood self really valued at that time. Some other questions you might have for yourself. Do you want to draw more than one heart? A good heart and a bad heart? Happy and sad, secret and open? And include different things in each one? Do different colors represent different emotions, events, and relationships? So again, you can use multiple pens to kind of help you along this heart reflection journey, or maybe highlighters that you colored in later. So what I'm going to do is set a 10-minute timer and leave the questions on the screen. You've got your piece of paper, you've drawn a large heart in the center of it. And you're going to spend some time pre-writing your memories for your heart map. You can feel free to put on some music, popular from your adolescence, to get you in the mood. For me, I'm going to play some Beethoven because it is no longer under copyright, and it should get you through the next 10 minutes. All right, let's begin. All right. I hope that went well for everybody. And with the luck, hopefully you're able to hear the music playing. So how did everybody do? While you're, kind of looking back at how you spent those last 10 minutes, I just want to say that I hope that exercise unlocked the creative juices for you, even just for a little bit. Ideally you'd spend 30 minutes longer on this exercise. So if you decide to pause the video to give yourself more time, that's fantastic. If not, that's okay too. Because mining your heart for the emotional molten core can be draining. So do whatever works for you. Here's a look at my heart map for the example about being told I don't belong in my family. This offers threads I can pull on to tease out the manuscript for Family Looks Like Love. So this is what I was able to accomplish in about 10 minutes. And I just, can keep pulling on those threads and think about, what emotions I was feeling or what I think are, really important elements that I want to get across in my manuscript. And this is something that I recommend that you consider doing for each new book you work on, especially for picture book manuscripts. I think it could be really interesting to pursue this creatively if you're going on a chapter by chapter basis as well for longer works, especially if you're trying to determine what the motivation is for your character throughout the story. So while you work on this, you're going to build on those details that'll help you build out the emotion in your stories for sure. So if you can mine them from your own experiences, then they'll truly come across as authentic, and that's what's going to resonate with readers and make that book memorable for years to come. So this is why I really like the heart mapping method, because it lends to the authenticity. It lends to, okay, if this is what I went through, it stands to reason that there are some other readers out there, or at least my character can go through a similar experience as well. And I'll be able to draw from my own experiences and to better inform what my character is going through right now. And that's going to really resonate with readers. Still, if you look at your heart map and it's rather empty, it's okay if you got stuck on it. So remember, reflecting on your childhood self or reflecting on any past experience can be terrifying, especially when it comes to your childhood when you perhaps were the most vulnerable version of yourself. So give yourself plenty of time to process what that looks and feels like and revisit your heart map when you're ready. Like I said at the start of the session, my debut picture book, A Family Looks Like Love, it's about my own experiences, but I had to use it. I had to put my dog in the story because it was just a lot for me to process on my own. So feel free to lean into that if you realize that you just can't, handle heart mapping right now, or need to consider your manuscript from a different perspective other than your own. So for the best of us, the emotional truth of your heart map is elusive and difficult to capture, right? There's no standard definition that exists. It's a lens that allows us to see ourselves in a story that results in a heartfelt connection to a fictional narrative. For me, those emotional truths definitely transcend facts. There are several ways that you can learn to harness your own emotional truth and ultimately the truth of your characters. So if those previous questions that I shared weren't getting you what you needed in order to produce a strong heart map, here's some other, questions you can consider asking yourselves, or other avenues you can take it. You can embrace that fear of vulnerability. If you, start writing about an emotion or a memory that is difficult, consider leaning into that and just free writing whatever comes to mind. You can mine your secrets, just do a heart map on every little dirty truth that you don't want to share with anybody else. You can tap into your memories with music and smell. Those are called emotional anchors. So if you're able to hear, I was softly playing Beethoven in the background, maybe that elicits something from your childhood. Perhaps a Disney classic came to mind and you're kind of remembering what that was like the first time you saw that film. Maybe it's, smelling peonies that reminds you of your parents gardening every Sunday afternoon. Use whatever you need to nurture those emotional anchors. You can also nurture an emotional garden of material that inspires you in general. Maybe it's a baby album that you have, a wedding album. Perhaps it's, a folder of nice memories you have from your workplace and kudos that you receive. There are a lot of little, tokens and momentums that people keep over time that they can refer to help build out that emotional core of their story. You can consider the juxtaposition of including powerful emotions with ordinary ones. What does that get across for you? Create challenges for your characters. Balance out those actions. Read, read, read. I definitely love mentor texts when it comes to, working on a new project. Those can really inspire me. And ultimately, trust yourself to go deep and transfer what you find to the page. Remember, it's a work in progress. It's not the final product. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to change things up a bit. That's okay. Lean into all this fear of vulnerability, changes in your work, and trust that the ultimate outcome is going to be something that you're proud of. So don't be afraid to experiment when it comes to finding the truth and the emotional center of your story. So once you've unearthed your own heart map and mind your truth, that's where the real fun can begin, all right? That's where you can apply the heart to the story. So we've learned what heart is, and we've learned how to mind heart, but now how can we apply it? But of course, it's not always a plug and play methodology to applying heart to your story. So let's examine some ways to add and address heart, addressing it successfully and avoiding some of those pitfalls that might occur in the process. Now, we've all written stories that fall short of our expectations. No matter if it's an agent, editor, beta reader, someone always has something unflattering to say about our work. It's inevitable. But those criticisms can be clues to what's missing in our stories. For example, if somebody tells me that my character's flat or they don't connect with the story, that often means there's not enough heart, right? The heart is missing. So feeling the heart can actually be easy to diagnose. The best writing moves the reader, and we can't move a reader if we don't write what moves us. We have to know our own pain, weaknesses, joys, fears, sadness, and jubilations. Without knowing ourselves, we can't write honestly. So when it comes to diagnosing failed heart, some avenues can be the characters are flat, stories too niche, stories vague, I didn't connect with the story. So anytime you hear something like that, that tells you that you're failing your heart. To address it and to avoid those pitfalls, it's important to ask yourself a few questions as you work on your manuscript. So is the story universal? What was the story spark? Do you feel something when you read it? Do you feel exposed sharing the story? Does it touch your inner child? Are you being honest with yourself? It's important to reflect on these questions because our bodies are always telling us something. Always. And I truly believe that our bodies are always telling us something. We just don't always listen. Our chest might warm or we'll feel a drop in our stomachs, depending on what we read. And before we can attach words to the emotions, we have to be able to locate the emotions inside our bodies. So ask, where does that emotion live? When you're reflecting on these different, questions in your manuscript. So what does the story spark? It's like, does it make your chest tighten? Does it make your stomach kind of queasy? That can give you a hint on what emotions are coming across in the story and where you should really, focus in on the heart. Does it touch your inner child? Does it, make you think back to a childhood memory? Okay, there's my childhood memory. What emotion does that evoke? That's an emotional theme I want to make sure is present throughout every page of my story. So the more you practice with this, the easier it'll get to, ensure that it's in your manuscript draft. And in order to tell that child-centered story, you also need to really understand the emotional core of your main character. To do that, you need to ask your main character some questions. So when you're reflecting the character's heart, you need to know what's universal about the story, what does your character want, how does the character change, and how does the plot advance the change your character is experiencing. You really need to connect with the reader by creating stories and experiences that are relevant to this audience's worldview, especially when we're talking about the kid book community. So rather than using words, kids connect to feelings. The kid might describe something using taste, smell, temperature, texture, or vibrations to better understand their emotion. So don't be afraid to really hone in on those different senses when it comes to your heart. So when you can tap into the root of those feelings by using all of your senses, that's when the character's emotional journey resonates. And that's when any child actually finds meaning and emotion in exploring picture books, right? So of course, this isn't the only way to write heart. Here's some how other picture book authors, approach the topic. So first up, talk about what was in the heart of the main character, as we just discussed. You want to show their struggles, show how they work toward their goals with only a few well-chosen words. Throw rocks at them, show conflict, resolve with all the feels. I really love that from Vivian Kirkfield. She's the author of Making Their Voices Heard. Throw rocks at them, see how they react when there's conflict in the story. That can really help drive your character's motivation and the entire manuscript forward. Hope Lim, author of My Tree, says, as I wrote the story, waves of emotions came and receded. The more I worked on this story, the more vividly I remembered my home back in Korea, my parents, and the connection I hold tightly to time that has passed. For me, mining the heart for stories can be done when I am honest with how I feel. I try to deliver those emotions in my stories with the hope that others may feel what I want to share. So again, as long as you lend authenticity to your story, that's what's really going to drive the connection for readers, and that's what's going to bring them back to your story again and again. Brittany J. Thurman, author of Fly, says, while heart is an emotional core, I think it can also be those nagging scenes in the back of our mind, the scenes that flash behind our eyes way before we begin to write. It's the pull, push, and tug, a magnet that calls us to our own story. That same pull and push eventually becomes the scenes that stick with readers. I just think that's beautiful. Jamila Tompkins Bigelow, author of Dual Story, says, I take to heart this quote from Robert Frost. No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. I write the things that resonate with me, not the things I think will resonate others. I write my experiences and what I know, the things that have had emotional resonance in my life. Again, it's about writing authentically and trusting yourself. And lastly, developing a logline early helps you strengthen your story arc and cut out the blubber. Even when I don't want a traditional arc, I use my logline formula for ideas on infusing the story with urgency and making it more engaging. I love this advice from Karen, author of Whole Whale. This is something I do as well when I feel like my story is going on a tangent that I don't want it to go to. So for those of you who don't know, a logline is just a sentence that it's your elevator pitch that describes your story. So always go back to that logline and refine it and make sure your story is matching what the logline says. And that can really help make sure your heart is focused and the manuscript is as tight as it can be. So once you've written about heart and you understand what other authors consider heart to be, you need to gauge its emotional resonance with actual readers, right? That's a big part of this too. So the stronger the response, the more confident you should feel about having told a story with a strong heart element. So when it comes to testing the heart, you want to ask your beta readers, What did they feel? Would they read it again and again? Would they read it to their kids, especially if we're talking about picture books? And where did they connect to the story? So answers to those questions will really help you determine what sections of your manuscript may work and what other parts are strong and how you can mirror the strength, on those pages throughout the rest of your story. And if you ever forget exactly what heart is, remember Kim Tomsik's words. Heart is the magic that makes readers feel that poignant oomph in their chest. So all great picture books have that heart moment. It's the precise moment when the book becomes more than just a book. It becomes a part of your life. It's a book you remember fondly for years to come and one you'll look forward to sharing with the kids in your life someday. And that heart moment can vary for every reader, making the experience so unique for a very special individual. Divining the emotional truth in stories can be elusive, but the heart of a reader understands it. As a writer, that's the test we must strive to ace. So again, though details are wonderful, heart is that magic that makes readers feel poignant oomph in their chest, so that the story stays with them long after the last page is turned. So that's all I've got when it comes to mining the heart, finding the emotional truth in your story for your readers. Thank you so much. I would love to stay in touch. Here's my contact information on the page. I also have the QR codes you can scan and easily access all of this and more. I have a survey for today's presentation. I would love for you to, take 2 minutes to respond to it. The feedback really helps me improve the programming that I offer. Additionally, anybody who completes the survey, I will send you a copy of my Mining the Heart template as well as a storybook template. So, please feel free to take out that survey. You can also subscribe to my newsletter and reach out if you have any questions. I really appreciate you attending today's session, and I look forward to connecting in the future. Thank you so much.